Well, as we face a new year, I thought it would be good for us to look at this psalm to remind us who our God is and who we are in relationship to him. Psalm 139 contains truth about God, and what it says about God is absolutely true since it's God's word, breathed out, authoritative, inerrant. Yet it's not merely truth about God in an abstract sense, as if it were truth that's just out there, that exists with or without us, true even if we don't believe it. Of course it is that, but it's much more than that. It's truth that is known and experienced and applied. The Psalms teach us how to take the doctrinal truths of God and his actions, that which God has revealed of himself to us, and speak them back to him in prayer and praise and love and devotion. So it's God's word to us, it's also our word to God. We speak his truth and then we follow that up with living in a way that gives glory to him. Now, a bit earlier this year in The Authentic Life, we saw that in the Bible there are four main types of writing: story, truths, praise, and commands. Or we could express it with these four Ds. Drama, God's action in his creation. Doctrine, the truth that God makes known to us in his action. Doxology, which is the worship that God invokes from all who know his truth. And then finally, discipleship, the God-glorifying life that flows out of that true worship. Now, the Psalms fit into that doxology category, and they're like a bridge between knowing the doctrinal truth of God and living out that truth in our day-to-day lives. So as we look at this psalm, we'll not only see deep truths about God's attributes, but how these attributes directly impact on us. And we see this simply in the way that the psalm opens and closes. Verse 1, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. And then at the end, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there's any grievous way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. So it opens with a statement about God. He is the one who searches and knows. More than that, he has searched me and he has known me. This tells us that he both has the ability to search and to know, and that he has put that ability into action in relation to me. And then it closes with a direct application of his searching and knowing. In essence, asking God to make his complete knowledge of me known not only to him, but also to me, so that I may be changed, corrected, and led to live in a way that he calls me to live, a way that will continue on into eternity. Now we'll see four key attributes of God in Psalm 139. An attribute is simply an aspect of God's character, the essence of who he is as the true and living God. And these attributes are ones that theologians described with words beginning in omni, the Latin word that means all. Now each of these four could be studied purely academically, building up a store of knowledge about them, what we call doctrine. But each of them also means something for how we know God, how he relates to us, and how we in turn respond to him. That doxology that flows into discipleship. So let's go through these four attributes. Firstly, God's omniscience, which means he's all-knowing. To say God is omniscient means he knows all things, and all means all. Not just the sum total of everything that can be known about the universe, not just everything that happens and has happened in the past, but also the future in its entirety. Isaiah 46 says, "Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose." This is a recurring theme throughout the whole book of Isaiah, that unlike the idols and the fake gods of the nations, the Lord shows that he is God by telling his people what is to come and then ensuring that what he promises actually comes to pass. Now, God's knowledge isn't like our knowledge. His knowledge isn't accidental. Accidental knowledge means that the thing that's known precedes the knowledge of it. For example, this building was built in 1926, long before I existed, and I think pretty much everyone else here as well. My knowledge of it began at a point in time when I went past and I saw it for the first time. I had nothing to do with bringing it into existence, and me coming to know about it didn't change it in any way. Well, God's knowledge is not like that creaturely knowledge. His knowledge comes before the existence of the thing he knows. We see this in creation. God said, "Let there be light," before light existed. He had knowledge of light. He spoke forth that knowledge and he brought light into existence. Light was his idea. It wasn't something that already existed in reality or even in principle, that God found out about it and then decided to do something about it. That might sound all philosophical to us, but it isn't, because it explains for us how it can be that, as Romans 8:29 puts it, we are those whom he foreknew and whom he predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. He didn't just know about us as a future possibility, or because he peered down the corridor of time and saw that we would exist. No, before the world was created, God the Father deliberately planned to create you in his image, so that you may know him, so that you may be adopted as his child. So his knowledge of the future is because of his intention to bring about his good purposes. Verses 2 to 4 tell us this knowledge that God has encompasses both our actions and our words. But it's not mere knowledge of these external things. It actually reaches right into the thoughts and the motives of our hearts. He knows what we do before we do it. He knows why we do it, even more than we know ourselves. I could get a PhD in psychology to try to understand my behaviour, and I'll only know an infinitesimally small fraction of God's complete knowledge of me. And his knowledge of me is intentional. What he knows of me isn't stored away like a file in a heavenly hard drive. His knowledge does something to me and for me, because he is the Father who has the goal of conforming me to the image of his Son. So verse 5 tells us, "You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me." Two images there. The first line is the image of being surrounded like a flock of sheep, surrounded by shepherds and made to move in one direction. The second line is the image of a potter, placing their hand on a lump of clay and forming it into a pot. Both together paint a picture of the Father shaping us into his intended design for us. This causes us then to come to a place where we must acknowledge our limited knowledge and our utter dependence upon him. Verse 6, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's high. I cannot attain it. God's omniscience, all-knowing, humbles me and brings me to my knees to acknowledge my creatureliness. I cannot and I never will have all knowledge. I'll only know that which God in his good and sovereign wisdom gives me in order to live as a human being. So we can gladly accept this truth about ourselves only because we know this wonderful truth that he first knew us and has known us. The second attribute is his omnipresence, everywhere present. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? To say that God is omnipresent is to say there's nowhere in creation that he's not present. God didn't make the world and then step back and let things run like a well-oiled, perpetual motion machine, occasionally intervening to remind us creatures that he's still up there somewhere. No, his continual presence to every subatomic particle, every electron, proton and neutron, and every galaxy and star and black hole, that's what keeps everything together. Colossians 1:17 says, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And then Hebrews 1:3, he is the radiance of the glory of God, speaking here of Jesus, who is God, and the exact representation of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. If God were to withdraw his presence for a moment from any part of his creation, it would cease to exist. Even in hell, which some people try to explain as a place where God is absent, God is very much present, sustaining the existence of those who remain eternally unrepentant. The most common word used in the Bible to describe God's presence to his creatures is the word for face. The famous Aaronic blessing prays that the Lord's face would be turned towards us and shine upon us. But to be cursed, to be under judgment, doesn't mean God's absent, but he's very much present with his face turned away from us so that we know only his wrath. So even in hell, we cannot escape his presence. God is present to us, this psalm tells us, both in space and in time. Verses 8 to 10 describe the three dimensions of the world. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. So in the ancient perception of the world, heaven is the sky above, and under the earth, called Sheol, speaks of the destiny of those who die, those whose body has returned to the dust from which they came, and whose soul has returned to God. So I can rise to the highest and the lowest points of the earth, and God will be there. Verse 9, if I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. The wings of the morning describe the furthest extremities of the east from where the sun rises, like a bird with wings. And the Israelites who lived on the eastern side of the Mediterranean, for them the uttermost parts of the sea were the extremities of the west, in our perspective, that way, beyond the end of the earth. So no matter where I go in creation, God is close. And in the words of Paul in Acts 17, in him we live and move and have our being. And when God created the heavens and the earth, he also designed it to operate in time, with days and years and seasons. So he not only sustains the earth, but he sustains the passage of time, marked by day and night. So verse 11 and 12, if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. God doesn't take time off or go to his bedroom to rest or sleep at night, unlike us. Remember how Elijah mocked the prophets of Baal when they failed to get their God's attention? He suggested that their God was asleep and so unavailable to show up. Well, God does not sleep or become available at night. Every moment for him is like daytime. And this speaks not just of physical dark and light, but also spiritual dark and light in people's hearts. We may foolishly, like Jonah, try to run from God by changing our location on the planet, but we can also try to run from him right where we are, by blocking him out of our consciousness, by allowing our hearts to become darkened to this knowledge of God. But even then, we'll never be able to push out the fact either of his presence with us, nor the deep down inkling that will always bug our consciences and remind us of this reality. When we know him in Jesus Christ, we're told in 2 Corinthians 4, God who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Paul's use of the word face here is deliberate from the Old Testament word. He's saying God is present to us now in the presence of Jesus, that through Jesus alone we may come into the presence of God and know his face turned towards us, not turned away from us. The third attribute is God's omnipotence. To say that God is omnipotent means nothing is impossible for him. He has all power. His omnipotence is displayed first and foremost in the fact that he created the universe out of nothing. If he'd made it out of something already existing, he'd be incredibly clever and very powerful, but not all powerful, because there'd be something there that he had not created. God's creative power by which he made the universe is the same power employed in creating us. See the parallel imagery here? You formed my inner parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. And then verse 15, my frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Poetically, the swollen tummy of a pregnant mother is like the globe of the earth. Just as in Genesis 2, God takes a scoop of dust, the stuff that makes up the earth, forming it into the man, breathing life into him and making him a living soul. So he takes a scoop now of the stuff of the man and woman, what we call DNA, and he forms it into a person, creating you and I as unique individuals in God's image, made both of the stuff of the earth, but also of God's special, powerful act of creation. And at just the right time, we're born into this world in order to live and breathe and have our being in him. So each of us is then born with an innate sense of being designed for dignity. Verse 14 says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it, very well. 99% of human anxiety and fear stems from our knowledge both of what we were created for, but also our knowledge that we fall short of what we are supposed to be. We try to convince ourselves that this glorious creature that we are is just the result of fortunate but purposeless processes. And we work hard to attribute to ourselves some kind of innate value, but we always fall short, coming up instead with distortions and contradictions. For example, we insist on inalienable human rights for everyone, yet we deny these same rights to unwanted or inconvenient unborn children. So we think we can produce fullness of life, but it's always cut short by suffering and death. And we refuse to see that this is because we've sinned and we've fallen short of this glory of God for which we have been designed. We're also born with an innate sense of being designed for a purpose. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. God in his omnipotence not only creates our physical form, but our spiritual one. We are designed to carry out God's will, to glorify God and to fully enjoy him forever. So he decrees the moment of our birth and of our death and every day in between. They weren't imagined or thought about, but they were seen by his eye, planned as if being marked out on a calendar. Now, this isn't fatalism. Fatalism happens at the hand of an impersonal and disinterested God. It's not fatalism. This is destiny, a life created and planned by the Father in which every tiny detail serves his good eternal purposes. Which we've seen, for those who trust in Jesus, his good eternal purposes is for us to become like Jesus. Now, before the fourth attribute of God is expressed, David gives a bit of a personal response to this knowledge of God's omniscience, his omnipresence, his omnipotence. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you. The knowledge of God is on one level mind-blowing and incomprehensible, yet at the same time, it's precious. God had no obligation to tell us anything about himself or about ourselves. He could have just made us like all the other creatures, unable to ponder or to respond to such lofty and high thoughts. Yet he has made himself known to us. And by doing so, he's made ourselves known to ourselves. The fact that we know that God's thoughts are more numerous than the grains of sand on all the beaches of the world is itself something to wonder, to marvel at, to give thanks and to glorify God that he designed us to know even that. When he writes, I awake and I'm still with you, it's as if to say, this isn't the stuff of dreams or hallucinations. It's not the ramblings of a mind that's been driven mad by too much knowledge. On the contrary, this knowledge is what enables us to wake up from sleep and delusion. This psalm isn't an incomprehensible religious rant. It's sane, it's rational reflection on the reality of God and the reality of our humanity. The fourth attribute of God is called his omniustus, which is a word that not even many theologians use. It means all righteousness or perfect righteousness. Verse 19 says, "Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me." I searched the internet for musical adaptations of Psalm 139, thinking maybe we'll be able to sing one. I found that in nearly every case, verses 19 to 22 were omitted. This fourth attribute of God, his perfect righteousness or justice, it's not something that we like to sing about, especially when his justice comes face to face with evil humanity. Very few hymns are on this theme. Yet it wasn't a mistake that these verses are here at the end of this psalm, and so we have no right to edit them out. If you come across a musical adaptation of the full Psalm 139, please let me know. The attribute of God's perfect righteousness means more than what God is. It speaks of the intentionality of his heart and the actions that flow out of it. Abraham knew this. He said when he was praying for the city of Sodom, "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" Abraham knew the Lord's perfectly righteous character as a man who was justified by faith. So he was in a right relationship with him. He had certainly seen God's omniscience, his omnipresence, his omnipotence at work in all that God had done for him up to this point. Remember, God called him to step forward in faith, trusting that God knew and had planned his future. He knew that God went with him as he travelled from Ur to Canaan. He gave him the promise to create an heir from the infertile womb of Sarah, something impossible for man but possible for God. And knowing God's perfect righteousness meant Abraham could entrust himself to the Lord, knowing that all he does is right and good. So God's righteousness enables us to look realistically at the world around us, to identify evil for what it is, and to trust God when he says, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." Psalm goes on, "They speak evil, they speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord, and do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies." Now, I bet you struggle with these words. But that's because we've been trained to think of love and hate in emotional terms, as feelings instead of actions. Biblically, righteous hatred isn't an emotional response of disgust. It's a deliberate giving someone over to what they deserve. It's carrying out justice on the wicked. But notice that he's not speaking about his own enemies, but God's. He's not pledging to take action against these people, but simply knows that since they are God's enemies, it's God's prerogative to deal with them as they deserve. God's perfect righteousness also enables us to look realistically at ourselves. Verse 22, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." As we saw at the beginning, these verses are the personal application of knowing God's attributes of ultimate knowledge, his presence, his power, and his righteousness. We can entrust ourselves to him because of his revealed character. Because we know God is perfectly righteous, he will deal with evil in this world. And because we know that he is perfect love, we can trust that he will deal with us in a way that his righteousness is not compromised, but which also, despite our sin, will be good for us. And this is what he has done in the cross of Jesus. Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance he had passed over former sins. Sorry, I left the last bit of those verses out. Verse 26 says, it was to show his righteousness at the present time, so that he might be just and the justifier of those who have faith in Jesus. So Jesus' death doesn't overturn God's justice or give an alternative option. In the cross, God's perfect justice is carried out on sin, as Jesus in our place bears the wrath deserved by sinners. And by uniting us with him in his death and his resurrection, God's justice comes to bear on us, as he declares us now in Jesus to be not guilty, because we stand before him clothed in Jesus' perfect righteousness. So through faith, we are justified. We are made just as if I'd never sinned. Only a person who knows this, who knows their justification in Christ, can be so bold as to say to God, search me, try me, know my thoughts, see if there's anything grievous in me. Because we know that he does that now not to condemn, but to declare our forgiveness, to cleanse, to purify our hearts so that we can live for his glory and to be true to the people that he has created us to be.